Hello and welcome to another episode of Anfield Watch. I'm your host, Bence Bocsak, and today I'm delighted to say I'm joined by Laurence McKenna. Now, unless you've been living under a rock these past sort of decade, you'll probably know who Laurence is. He's asked me to introduce himself as a massive Liverpool fan, but he's done plenty of other things as well. So, Laurence, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. I was trying to work out who Anfield Watch is, but it turns out when you put a face to it, like it's much better looking than you imagine. I'm joking.
Thank you. And today, I think you probably will have guessed from the title of the video, we're going to be talking about Trent Alexander-Arnold. Now, by all accounts, it looks like he's almost certain to leave Liverpool on a free transfer and join Real Madrid. Laurence, initially, what was your reaction to the news that broke? I think it was Tuesday. I'm forgetting my days now, but it broke earlier this week.
I mean, when did it really break? Like, did it break 2 years ago now? Did it break like 18 months ago? When did it start to feel real? None of the stuff that has happened around Trent really surprises me anymore. I guess from my perspective, we've got it now. Trent probably wants to go. We don't actually understand the reasons behind it because there has been no communication around it. You can speculate, sure. But the overriding feeling for me was one of, oh, that's kind of sad that, first of all, we don't know why he's leaving and therefore we can't really give him a send-off. Normally in like a movie, like Batman dies and it's like, well, at least he died killing the Joker. Like there was kind of there's a bit of a understanding. With Trent, there's no communication from Trent's side, no communication from Liverpool's side, and the only party in this horrible love triangle is Real Madrid, who seem to be comfortable, toxic communicators anyway. So they're like the kind of awkward rich guy that your new girlfriend used to date, and he's a bit of what are you meant to do with that? It's like, oh, you win on almost all aspects apart from the personality one. Like you've got the nice car and all that stuff. But so I feel good about it in a sense of like, I knew it was going to happen, but it doesn't feel good because there isn't much you can like take from it. There isn't a like, oh, he doesn't like the culture. Oh, he doesn't like the manager. It's like, I think there's a lot of different elements that feed into just an overall feeling. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. And I guess it's going to be really difficult for him to communicate his real feelings or his real sort of reasoning.
Why though? Genuinely, why? Like, I understand that idea, but why is it difficult for Trent to communicate? I suppose he's in contract negotiations with the club. There's still the chance that he Schweinsteigers himself, right? And end of the season, he's on the middle of the field. But why is it all that hard to have clear communication when you're Liverpool vice club captain and you're also, an exceptional communicator anyway, and you've done a number of interviews that now seem slightly misleading, I guess, to an extent. Like, why communicate stuff that is blatantly not what you want now? Do you know what I mean?
I think people always make the argument like you want to protect the team and you don't want any sort of attention on the team and to distract the team. But at the same time, surely all this transfer talk and all of these rumours are going to be more distracting almost rather than having a sort of, this is what I'm going to do. And then it's all out in the open and people actually know for certain it's going to.
I think the team have known for a while. I think the team probably knew that Trent wanted to go. I think the team know broadly where Van Dijk and Salah sit. It would be weird if they almost hadn't had that conversation and were that bonded. And for that reason, I get it. I just think a lot of people kind of go to this sort of the default of, well, it must be an FSG issue. It must be. And I understand the frustration with the ownership, but I don't think therefore you can say blanket that everything they've done is bad or airs on the bad side. And I think, Sam, friend of ours, and quite a few other people have said on social, it's like, this is a clear long-term plan from someone like Trent to be in this position, to be able to make this decision. We don't have to say he made the decision 4 years ago that he was going to go to Madrid in this year, but you very clearly signed a short-term contract on in certain terms to get to this place. Doesn't matter if you thought 4 years ago, I'm going to go to Madrid at that point. Maybe that wasn't maybe it wasn't that calculated, but the club can't go, well, it's 6 years or nothing. That's not the way it works, you know?
Yeah, and I think I've seen a lot of interviews where you're sort of talking about winning the Ballon d'Or, becoming the best fullback that has ever played the game. So in that sense, you can kind of understand almost going to Real Madrid, because Real Madrid, without a question of a doubt, they are the biggest club there is. And if you play for them, you are likely to be in the conversation for the Ballon d'Or.
But that's all you will be. That, like, unless he has a master plan and his fitness is going to dramatically improve over the next, 6 months, which, a lot of Real Madrid players' health does dramatically improve when they go to the team. You saw Bale, become the Incredible Hulk when he arrived at the side, but then he was also out for long stints because he was injured and he couldn't quite carry that level of muscle. Then that is what you will be. You'll be in the conversation, but you're not going to be the winner, because guess what? When your assist goes forward, it goes to the guy that wins it. Guess what? When you are alongside or backing up Bellingham and Vinicius and Mbappe and all these other people that Real Madrid have got this list of players, what are they going to do? Work their way down and share the Ballon d'Or over those years? Because then that says to me that that's not a competition worth winning if Real Madrid just get to go, it's this guy this year, so that'll be the one. Who cares about that? No one cares about that as an institution at that point. It doesn't mean anything. Maybe it does still mean something to him, but I think broadly, again, because of the lack of communication, because of the lack of maybe transparency, whatever you want to call it, I think a lot of people are confused as to what his actual motives are for going there. You can have a bunch of word salad and a bunch of aspirations, but ultimately, and I know he's got a very high potential, that you've got to live up to that at that point. If you say you want to win a Ballon d'Or, it's only going to look delusional unless you are able to you actually know what the path is. Does that make sense? It's not me saying I don't think he's capable. I don't think he's a Ballon d'Or level player. But it's me saying, well, how does that materialize?
I mean, it would be unprecedented for him to win it. But I guess,
yes,
sort of going back to Liverpool, as a Liverpool fan, losing Trent Alexander-Arnold is kind of, I think people are talking about, their reactions online are quite negative about him or towards his departure. But I think we need to sort of focus on how devastating his loss would be on the team. This is the vice captain, and I was looking at some stats literally just before you joined, and he ranks among fullbacks in Europe's top 7 leagues. He ranks number 1 for progressive passes, expected assists, and all these key metrics, literally everything. So I think people don't necessarily, or right now, understandably, aren't focusing on the generational player that he is, and the generational player that Liverpool are now going to have to replace.
And the real question for me is, do you, you're never going to be able to go like for like, because like you said, he's number 1, so there isn't really a like for like replacement. And also, even if there was someone who was close in terms of stats, they probably aren't close in terms of style. They probably aren't close in terms of vice captaincy, all those kind of things. I think the emphasis in the team shifts more towards what Slot probably wants from a fullback, and you see more emphasis in the midfield. And I wonder if that is part of him deciding to leave and deciding to move on, is he knows he's never really going to be a slot midfielder because he doesn't have all those physical attributes, and he probably didn't have the physicality to do that over a full season. And that's no judgment on him. But at the same time, he's also probably not a slot fullback. It's as much as Slot has, lent into some of his great things. I don't think he's the fullback that Slot wants him to be. So maybe it is a parting of convenience rather than anything else. And actually what we're going to see is a player come in who probably won't have obviously won't have the same connection to the fans, but will be more of that makes logical sense as to why you're going to play in that position and you fulfill all these and tick all these boxes. And then the emphasis shifts more to maybe Gravenberch gets more, maybe whoever gets more time to show their own inclinations.
Yeah, I think the question mark even is if Liverpool are even going to bring in a right back, because David Ornstein in his reporting said that Liverpool see Conor Bradley as the ready-made replacement. So is there a chance that Liverpool don't even sign a right back and just play Conor Bradley?
That would be silly. That would just be crazy if you do that, though. I mean, maybe there's someone in the academy that you think is the next Conor Bradley. And again, not unlikely. I just don't see, Slot still speaks about availability, and Conor Bradley has not been available this season, nor's Trent. But Conor Bradley hasn't been available, and I don't feel comfortable with Quansah being the backup. There's got to be someone signed who can play in that position. And I think, we were talking about this before the podcast. That's a lot of turnover in a team. There's a likelihood Joe Gomez wants to leave this summer. There's, if Van Dijk was to leave, Robertson's got to be essentially replaced or moved to... There's so many positions now, where as exciting as it is for us to cover, that's a lot of gelling to do next season for a team who probably should have just been replacing one or two big parts and looking to transition out over the next 1 to 2 years.
Yeah, and I mean, we haven't even mentioned the attack yet, who doesn't seem to be too impressed by, and obviously,
rightly so.
There's a lot of talk about Alexander-Isak and all these kind of players coming in. So I guess it does leave a question mark, like what kind of profile of a right back are you going to bring in? One name that has kind of cropped up over and over again is Jeremy Frimpong. I have my personal reservations about him, and I'm not necessarily sure he is a fullback or he is the Arne Slot fullback that we're looking for, but he seems to be someone who's always mentioned, and I think there's various reports saying Liverpool have been in contact with him and etc. and etc. Do you think it's a possibility that he's signed?
Well, first of all, he speaks the language, and he knows local dialect. Great. Good. He knows what la means. Fantastic. Tick, as far as I'm concerned. And maybe that shows like there is an element of, want from the player or an understanding of like, hey, that's a cool club to be part of. And maybe the Dutch contingency thing works. Rafa Benitez has his Spanish contingent. Klopp kind of brought in... Klopp's guys are just religious people, seemingly, which is and I've got nothing against that. It's a good thing if it builds a good squad. Slot seems to want to have this element of the Dutch adaptability. Frimpong's really, he's exciting, even if he doesn't fulfill everything else. But sometimes I just wonder, what is it that would he maybe be responsible enough, I guess, would be my question in that area. But am I also thinking then, well, if Salah leaves, would Frimpong completely change his role? We're maybe imagining how do you fit into that system that we've watched. And actually, I think it'll be a completely different system that comes out next. And I'm not saying it's, therefore the midfield's a completely new midfield. I'm saying it will be a very different set of parts that probably play in similar areas. And that will change how we see the right back or whatever. In my mind, like I'm almost happier to have a Steve Finnan type character come in at right back than I am like someone who's so radically different. And so to that extent, I think Frimpong does kind of fit that as there'll be like this bombing on and it kind of work, and he's dynamic and he's got a big solid guy behind him. Maybe that does work for me. I see why you feel the same as I do, where it's like, we never know, or he's all potential seemingly.
Yeah, and I think for me, it's you're spending a lot of money.
A lot.
But there's a lot of question marks in regards to whether that is going to pay off. So yes, Frimpong is a great player, and he's shown that by Leverkusen. He can be a very good player. He's a great goal scorer, first of all, and he creates chances. He's very good at getting into the box, but that kind of profile is not really what Liverpool want in a fullback. And if you're going even back to Arne Slot's sort of system at Feyenoord, that's never the kind of fullback that he had. He had Gertruda, who's now RB Leipzig, almost sort of coming into the middle and being a lot more repressive in his style of play, even compared to Trent in terms of, dropping deeper. So I guess the question mark is Slot ready to radically transform his principles that he's had for many years now?
Well, also, like, what are those principles? Are those principles dependent or contingent on that right back being able to do that? Or is it just that he needs a player from that area to be able to then fulfill some of those needs? And does he, for that reason, do we then maybe have it? Like when I say, I'm talking about Steve Finnan, I'm not talking about actually signing Steve Finnan, but although, if he was young enough and he was a regen, I'd totally take him. Like, what I mean is maybe if we were to sign a more functional right back then does that put more emphasis on a Gravenberch or whoever it is in the midfield to change their role a little bit? Because at the moment there does seem like there's a lot of filling in, or kind of they're still a bit tethered to, well, Trent's going forward or Trent's got to do this, so what do I do? If you unleashed a midfielder, and I'm just thinking about the one for signing Zubamendi last year, if you had someone who's a bit more like, don't worry, I'm chilling, I'm a right back, I get it, that maybe works. But maybe the reason he used Gertrude was because that was where he brought that aspect in. Do you get what I'm saying?
Yeah, I get what you're saying. And I think that's another interesting point, because Liverpool are still probably going to be looking at a midfielder as well, among all the other positions. So it would, like, all of this could change. All of this conversation that we're having right now could be radically transformed if Liverpool bring in a different type of midfielder, a different profile.
Sure.
Maybe not necessarily the Zubimendi profile. I'm not sure if he'd fit that box, but someone else of a similar kind could potentially change the conversation that we're having.
It's just different, right? Like Zubimendi is a different profile to any of the guys we've got in that midfield. I'm just thinking of essentially that difference is the thing that I'm wondering. And I think you're right. Like maybe there is like not a Gertrude type, but someone who sort of just thinks, wow, I can really just change a game. We know how when he's really good at profiling players, right? And we saw that even against Newcastle. Like, he just brought on different profiles and it worked and it changed. That need for just another profile, someone that we might look at it and go, wow, that guy's actually kind of boring, or that guy's actually kind of like quite one-dimensional. Maybe when he brings them in, they become, Endo goes or whatever, and we see a change in the shape that the opposition just can't deal with, or that, changes someone else's profile in the team.
Yeah, I guess moving away from Frimpong, there is the possibility of Bradley being the first choice and Liverpool maybe bringing in an even younger player and banking on even more potential rather than actual quality at the moment. So one of the names, and Sam Maguire has written a really good piece on Anfield Watch about him, is Martin Fernandes, who is at Porto, and he ranks really highly in a very important sort of key metrics for fullbacks in terms of creativity. And if you watch him play, he's really good at sort of switching the ball, almost Trent-esque in that sense. He's a profile that is definitely interesting for Liverpool. Maybe not necessarily the big name like a Frimpong, who's been there and who's played in Europa League finals and is a full Netherlands international, but he is a very interesting player, and maybe he is the sort of almost smarter option for FSG that we've kind of come to expect from Liverpool.
Yeah, I also think a lot of people are obviously thinking Trent felt very much like a unicorn when he came through, and because of all the emotional elements that are attached to Trent, I think a lot of people still think, well, he's impossible to replace. And there are elements of his game that are impossible to replace, but when you read something like Sam's profile, then you do sort of think, well, some people in Europe have gone out and looked for that kind of player, or they've created another kind, like a variant of the fullback of Trent. And actually, I think in recent seasons, again, I love his bravery. To an extent, I'm frustrated with the way that he leads the team sometimes, because he can have an element of the Gerrards of just kind of like slipping out of a game when he's like, well, you guys aren't trying, so I won't try. Like, I wonder if in recent years, people like Slot and even Klopp to an extent have had to politically play it right with Trent because of all the benefits. And actually, if you brought in Trent with none of the politics or none of the whatever you want to call that, the chess game you have to play. Not that I'm saying I think he's awkward. I don't think he is. I think he's a great player. I think he's a good vice captain. But what would that do to the team? Where does it shift the emphasis? And what could you get out of someone who possibly goes, yeah, I can do all that stuff, but I'm also not the same hero that Trent wants to be? To an extent, that might actually be a good emphasis shift in the side, and more can go to another player or another big leader in the side.
I guess what Liverpool and the scouts will have to figure out is if Fernandes is ready for that next step. I think it's a small sample size that he's sort of produced for Porto, although very impressive. And I think the same applies for the next player. I'm inundated with messages on social media about this guy, Guevara Reed. I actually stumbled upon this very early on. A few months ago, I was scrolling on YouTube and I found Dutch interview with him when it was like kind of like he had to pick between things.
Yeah.
And that was one when he was asked about Manchester United and Manchester City, and it was in Dutch. I don't speak any Dutch. I don't understand Dutch, but I saw that the Liverpool icon pop up when he was asked about Manchester United and Manchester City. And in the company, we have a few Dutch guys working for us. So I asked him, what does this mean? What did he say? And we wrote a piece on it. And it turns out he's a massive Liverpool fan.
Right.
At the same time, Arne Slot also gave him his professional debut for Feyenoord. And pretty much ever since that video has been discovered and he went sort of trending on social media, he has blown up. Like, he produced a brilliant performance against Rafael Leao in the Champions League.
That's not hard, by the way.
Hat-trick of assists against FC Twente in his last club game, and he just keeps going to bigger and bigger heights. But he's still very young, and again, very short sample size, but very impressive.
Yeah, I remember when you guys kind of had that clip going around, and I remember reading all the profiles on him and a lot of people speculating. Again, you're right. It's one of those sample sizes. And I guess some of these guys, I do look at them and think, oh, there's a Brighton transfer in there before you come to us. Or there's someone. We know Liverpool love to have a Premier League proven player or someone who's at least got, we know that he can make that step up or he's shown those elements. But maybe there is this element of why would you bring in Hughes if you didn't want to maybe subvert and just skip? I always ask that question. I asked this of Ian Graham the other day. I had him. He's the ex-Liverpool researcher. He's fantastic. He speaks so well. I said, why don't people just cut out the middleman? Cut out the 50 million you've got to spend on him. And he was like, we always just wanted that sample size. We wanted to be able to see that they could do it very consistently and they weren't just having like a hot hand or that moment, because we can't afford, he laid it out very clearly, we can't afford to be Brighton. We can't afford to have a season where the player does have 12 good games, but 26 where they don't, It's Liverpool just cannot be that. And that's part of the issue, I guess, with both those profiles you just mentioned. They look great, but you would need a senior guy ahead of them to be like this,
Yeah, and I guess to answer that, we really need to be in the boardroom right now and listening into those conversations that they're having right now, whether Liverpool are willing to change that sort of strategy. Because I also remember, I think Ian Graham said one of his biggest regrets during his time at Liverpool was not pushing Liverpool harder to sign Karu Mitoma, who's obviously gone on to become a brilliant player. Although, that being said, he did also need that sort of intermediary stage when he went to Belgium and to sort of get him adjusted to European football. But he also really stood out in the J-League at the time when he was playing there. And obviously, I think now that Liverpool brought back Michael Edwards, Julian Ward, Richard Hughes is there, I think this summer we're really going to be seeing what their actual plan is, because last summer we didn't really see much of that. But this summer, I think it's really going to sort of tell us what their vision is going forward for Liverpool.
The thing that I've really realized is kind of hamstrung Liverpool. And, again, I think he gets a lot of hate anyway, but I think the Darwin Núñez transfer really has changed a lot of what Liverpool are kind of capable of. If we bought a striker who was maybe a bit more adaptable or had bedded in or whatever you want to call it, we wouldn't even really be having that conversation right now around Núñez. We'd be thinking scores goals, fits in, or whatever you want your striker to do. We wouldn't even really be having the Isak conversation because he was bought to be our Isak, right? That has changed the face of the summer for us because there is no way that he doesn't leave in my mind. But the problem is also there is no way that Diaz doesn't want to go, or maybe one other player, and there's possibility of other players that want to leave as well. If I was Harvey Elliott, I would currently be looking at Liverpool and thinking, this is great, but how much playing time am I really going to get? I need to be stepping up. There's probably a £40 million transfer to Spurs just sitting on the table. There's probably a £40 million transfer to, I think we were willing to accept 32 or something from Brighton last season. That's a lot of names that we've mentioned in one breath, but also just in one podcast, because we I had a clip that went semi-viral last season, to beginning of this season, where I was just talking about, I think a lot of Liverpool fans are going to see there's quite a lot of turnover on this squad to come. And people got kind of angry because they were like, well, that's naming the entire team. And I was like, yeah, that doesn't feel great, does it? That there's only like maybe 2 or 3 guys where we're like, well, he should stay and he will definitely stay. That really, that puts a big shift in. And, you know, as good as Slot is, and maybe that's part of the reason we got him, it doesn't make me think that that's, you know, title on title next season. It makes me think, maybe we're pushing for top 4 more next season, and it's more of the season next season that we thought this would be.
Yeah. And I think at the same time, it's almost necessary, like these changes, because that certain players don't necessarily fit Arne Slot's system anymore. There's certain players who are getting on in years and need to be replaced or will need to be replaced in the future. And I think when we're looking at sort of big teams in European football, I always think of Barcelona, how great they were at the peak, and then they just ended up keeping Jordi Alba, I think, for a little bit too long. Lionel Messi probably stuck around way more. Like, he was still a brilliant player, but was he really worth the amount that he was getting paid at towards the end of his Barcelona career? And I guess Liverpool kind of want to avoid that. They'd rather transition now and take a lot quicker, maybe, to come back to where they once were. Whereas for Barcelona, it took them years to be at the stage that they are now, where they kind of sort of transformed the team and they've got new young guys coming in like Lamine Yamal and Rafinha. Sure. It took them years to get back to where they were, I think almost a decade.
It's also weird to think of this side that we're looking at as a side that we need to transition, because obviously they're on to have had a pretty impressive season. We, you know, as much as you want to be depressed about the Champions League, I think PSG are probably one of 2 or 3 favourites, and losing on penalties to PSG isn't all that shameful, I don't think. And, you know, the Newcastle game is really, for me, is a bit of an outlier because, you know, I don't know if you were there, but when you're in the stadium, it was basically a Newcastle home game, which, you know, ultimately maybe that shouldn't impact the team. But, you know, it is weird to think of. I think we maybe had this problem with, you know, if you go back 30 years, it is almost 35 now. Felt weird that Liverpool were so powerful and had so many good players. I remember people at the time being like, no, these guys are still good. I was like, I remember I was young and I had just all these legends of the team that played so well under Kenny towards the end of the 80s, you know, early 90s. Suddenly it was like, oh, well, actually, we've got to move a lot of these guys on. And it felt very like, no, we don't need to. No, what are you talking about? Like, this guy's going to play forever. So you're right, but I just don't think we've had that in a while. We were so willing to let go of that Brendan Rodgers team. We were so ready to just be like, there's no one I feel sentimental about. Like, Emre Can, cool, nice overhead kick, but like, goodbye. Like, and he was probably one of the better players. Like, there was no one in that side we felt sentimental about. And to an extent, the same with Rafa Benitez. We began to feel very unsentimental about that side. And they got dismantled anyway. There was no one from the Roy Hodgson era we felt sentimental about. Paul Konchesky, this has been lovely. Like, it's kind of the point is we've not really had to deal with this as a fan base. And there's probably a lot of fans in our fan base now who are dealing with this for the first time, of just moving on from greatness to reach out for the next vine. Do you know what I mean? And when you said that really kind of clicked for me is, and maybe some of it's enforced. We don't want Trent to go. And maybe, you know, the same with Salah if he does end up taking a big deal. But it doesn't mean that it's not necessary, you know? I think that's what's hard about dealing with it. People really misprofile what a lot of reasonable Liverpool fans are actually saying online, which is, we get why Trent's got to go or wants to go. We get why Robertson has to leave as a left back. We get why Salah might want to go somewhere, all these kind of things. Doesn't make it any less easy to just let them leave. You know, you might understand why you got to leave your job or whatever. Doesn't make it like, well, we'll just jump in. You know, we've learned to love these guys. Like, there's a whole relationship there that, you know, if you're a Brighton fan who works at Sky Sports, you have absolutely no idea about that. Like, no offense to those people, but you have no idea about that. So it's way easier to go, why are these people I'm sick of the people online who are like, why are these people freaking out? Why are they so angry? It's like, well, we're fans of this team. We care about the side. Like, what are you talking about? I just don't understand this whole idea of like, these people they have careers. Would you be angry at your friend if he wants to leave a job? It's not like, what are you talking about? Like, there's not anywhere near the same thing. So I guess I get there's a lot of different narratives that go side by side here. And it's partially why we got a slot, because he's calm and he'll just, whatever the team is given to him, he'll play it and he'll make it work, as he has done this season.
Yeah. I mean, like you said, there's no denying this hurts. Trent, going back to Trent, it hurts. It really does hurt as a Liverpool fan, because we've seen him grow from basically a little teenage boy coming on under Jurgen Klopp and becoming probably one of the best right backs to have ever played in the Premier League.
Right.
And maybe even the world.
Yeah.
Winning the Champions League and the Premier League probably twice. I guess as well, it's almost another sort of signal of the end of the Jurgen Klopp era, because he is one of the longest serving members from that era. And
which, by the way, has also contributed to why he looks in the state he looks right now, why he is so exhausted. That's another big reason why he's in the state of his body right now, which no one's talking about.
Exactly. And I think there's another element to this in terms of, which I think a lot of people have raised, is what else is there for him to do at Liverpool? In terms of the motivation, he's won the Champions League. He's going to win the Premier League twice. I mean, unless something catastrophic happens in the last sort of 2 months of the season. What is there for him to achieve at Liverpool?
I mean, maybe you're sort of talking from our perspective, or you're talking from his? Because
I think it's from his perspective mostly. If you're looking at it from sort of his career, I've seen a lot of videos about like how you motivate players and teams to continue on winning and being at the highest level. From Trent's perspective, maybe he's thinking, actually, I am struggling for motivation here because I've won the Premier League. Like, there's no other ceiling for me. And if he's aspiring to be a Ballon d'Or winner, he's seen sort of Salah and Van Dijk have some of the best seasons I've ever seen Liverpool players have, and completely be ignored in the Ballon d'Or votings. Maybe he's just thinking, it's not going to happen for me at Liverpool. I need to go and play at Real Madrid, because that's where the rest of the football world sort of media focuses on.
I get that point. I guess this idea that he can't achieve anything else, 3 Premier Leagues is better than 2. This is, I can keep saying higher numbers are better than higher numbers. 5 Premier Leagues is, you're undeniably, you're up there with like your Phil Neals and your Kennys then. Do you know what I mean? 2 Premier Leagues, good. Like, well done you. But you're not in, maybe you are in that all-time 11 in the hearts, but in terms of cups, maybe you're not. You're not quite Gary Neville, and I never thought I'd say this. You're not quite that Gary Neville type where it's like, but Gary Neville also was not Trent Alexander-Arnold. So I get that. And I think that really what you're getting at, and I think you're right about, is this is a decision. This isn't like necessity that he has to go to Madrid, because very few players go to Madrid out of necessity, out of, well, I guess I've got to go to Madrid then. It's not the way it works. He's going because he wants to change. He's going because he wants to grow and be different. That, I think, is the core of where we're at. We don't want to be Real Madrid. That's not what I wouldn't want to go to a stadium and boo my own players at half time because they'd slightly done something. It's just not us. So maybe that's his own decision. To an extent, that makes it a little bit easier to let go. And after a couple of weeks of everyone abusing him, and maybe a chant of he's the wool in our team being the joke around Anfield for a couple of weeks, maybe we do get a bit of a sweeter goodbye. Maybe there is a nice message. Maybe the club do help him a little bit with the here's why I'm going. I love you. You're the best, but I have to do X. I think that'll soften the blow in the long term. And I'd imagine as a player, maybe he's got to focus on that for his own mental health and his own well-being. Maybe he knows the plays that are to come. We don't. And that might make it a bit easier. I worry we just don't see him in a Liverpool shirt again, if that makes sense. Like, maybe we will. Maybe there's like a 5-minute thing, but that's not going to be long enough for us to express all the emotions in one day. Does that make sense? So that's hard. That's the hard bit for me. Like the last day of the season at Anfield, he's going to be there. He's not going to skip that day. And there will, if there is a trophy parade, you can't skip that.
Yeah.
Those are difficult moments.
I think that's the most sort of interesting part now is what is his communication going to be? How is he going to communicate this? Because it's not an easy thing to communicate. And at the end of the day, he is a Liverpool fan himself. This city still means a lot to him, as difficult as that is to believe for us right now when he's leaving. It is still, Liverpool is going to be that special club for him. But it's really difficult to communicate that when you're leaving on a free transfer to one of Liverpool's biggest rivals in the Champions League.
Would you not also be a little bit annoyed if you were Trent that Real Madrid do keep leaking things? Like, I would feel, I want to be that superstar. I want to have my own integrity respected. And I'm not really sure that Real Madrid have 100% shown themselves to respect that integrity. They've really treated Trent and Liverpool as in quite a transactional way. And I know obviously you can put all that rubbish out there and there'll be, there's probably a few Real Madrid fans that are watching this and speed through it so that they can find the moment where they can pinpoint what jealousy looks like, because that's seemingly the only way that you can explain why someone would dislike Real Madrid. It's not that there are plenty of things that they do or that people don't like, or that there is an inherently dislikable element to people who look down on other people in the game. It's that you must be jealous. And if you can't see why we want Ballon d'Ors and winners, then you're the problem. I don't know if you can tell, if you're a Spanish native speaker, I'm being sarcastic. It's something we do. That is, I would think as a player, do they value, is that valuable? Am I being treated like LeBron James here? Because that's the picture that everyone's putting out there as like, he's like LeBron. It's like he gets to pick his own future, guys. No, not really. LeBron's not the same profile and isn't being treated like that. Like, that's not the way it works, No,
I think in many ways it's just an indictment of modern media as a rule. That's why Jurgen Klopp's announcement was such an outlier and so shocking, because that was kept so closely guarded as a secret and then came out all at once. And I suppose if you were Trent, you'd probably want something like that as well. But the reality is, especially with the Madrid media, that's just not possible for any player in the modern era.
It shows, by the way, how much reverence I think Klopp was treated with that didn't get anywhere, and it came literally out of the blue. It's so hard to do that in any media, especially the fact that, he had told people before that, like that nothing had leaked. Maybe that shows how important Jurgen Klopp was.
I guess my final question in that regard to you then is, do you think this Trent news would have been perceived differently if it was kind of like the Klopp announcement video? It came out at the end of the season when Liverpool won the league, and he just did a video sort of similar to that Adidas video he put out last year, where he was sort of showing his journey from the academy to the first team and saying his goodbyes. Would Liverpool have would you have felt differently?
Number one, showing us 5 home videos with a poorly read voiceover is not showing us your journey. That's just doing a piece of marketing, really. I was actually really underwhelmed by that video last year. I remember watching it and being like, oh, you've tried to do something there. Well, you got the A level. And being just like really severely underwhelmed by it. I guess I wouldn't think of it as, it's the communication, isn't it? It's the fact that we're in the dark over all this stuff. It's the fact that it's not being, seemingly we are coming last in where we matter. And I think you're kind of getting at it there. Like it feels so obviously wrong to do it like this. I think that level of disregard. Even yesterday, there was like a Pro Direct video that went up where it was Adidas, a massive Pro Direct partner. Nike, I guess, are as well. And Pro Direct put out that, like, you know, you're Carlo Ancelotti's Ring doorbell. And I was like, and Trent's like knocking on it's cool, good. I think it shows what an open secret it is inside the industry that Trent's wanted this. That is the icky bit, right? And that's like, we knew we're just managing that rather than anything else. You can't do that video at the end of the season. Because really, what that speaks to is the truth, which was, if you're going to go almost do a Coutinho, right? Which is what a lot of people have been saying. Tell us you want to go to Barcelona, but sign a 3-year deal and make those pay for you. If you really cared about that, that would be the case. But that maybe then that speaks to the conversation that you haven't and I haven't really had on this podcast or whatever. This was a monologue. It was FSG might have changed the relationship the players have with the club, and maybe the player doesn't feel that element of loyalty to FSG to get their money. Like maybe he doesn't care if FSG get their money, and therefore he doesn't care if Liverpool get their money. You know, maybe he doesn't take FSG on their word, but that's a whole other thing. But at least if you're going to go, make Real Madrid, we know they're good for the money, like make them pay, He's not done that. And that's what I think is disappointing to us, is it feels like, you really want to go on a free and you want us to take that well? Like, why? You're not leaving us with anything. That annoys me. Then I'd take a video,
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head there. I think you can excuse him leaving. It's the fact that he's leaving for nothing. And I think to end it in a positive way, just look at PSG right now without Mbappe. Same situation happened to them and they are better than ever. It almost feels like they underwent the sort of metamorphosis where they sort of went into their cocoon and came out
right,
a bigger and even more beautiful butterfly with this young team, this exciting young team that probably outplayed Liverpool over 2 legs. And that's saying a lot because we haven't seen that under Arne Slot at all this season. So I think there is a silver lining almost. As difficult it is to believe, but Liverpool can sort of start anew and can do something potentially even better.
I think you're right. And also, to a large extent, if you're Slot, you're looking at that and thinking, how exciting is it that, obviously working with Trent's great, but how exciting is it that I can put my own mark on every position in the side, and maybe I'm not married to Trent's maybe lack of tracking back, whatever you want to call that, or just idiosyncrasies, should we put it like that? That'd be exciting for a coach, that you're moving that on. I would say there's plenty of positives. And also, I think if we want to be treated as a big club, which we are, act like it then. Don't worry. Cool. You want to go? Like, this has been great, but goodbye. Like, thank you. We're done. You move on. You go do your big thing, which you learned from us, and we'll go do our big thing. And we're very grateful. But we're big enough to sustain a right back leaving, put it that way. That's, broadly, I'd feel good about that if I'm a big club, which we are.
Well, listen, Laurence, thank you for your time. I really enjoyed it. I feel like we could have gone on for a long time.
We should make this a regular show.
Definitely. But, like all good things, and like Trent Alexander-Arnold stay at Liverpool, everything has to come to an end at some point.
Is this contract done now? Am I free to go and do the Real Madrid podcast I always wanted to do?
It seems like it. Yeah, thank you very much.
Thanks.
If people want to find you, where can they find you?
Just type in Laurence McKenna and just don't click the negative ones and you'll be all right.
And thanks everyone else for listening in. And if you enjoyed the video, make sure to subscribe to Anfield Watch.